Pokemon fans are constantly shouting their opinions. Best game, best starter, best type-changing horse. You can't go 10 minutes in this community without seeing a Pokefan sharing their thoughts. Which is awesome. It's incredible that a franchise can spark so much dialogue, and that fans can be brought together by simply sharing their opinions. But with that being said, sometimes you come across an opinion online that can't be described as anything other than wrong. Today we're going to take a look at some wild Pokemon opinions I've come across online and see just how terrible some of them really are. But I won't sit here and act like an authority all on my own. To keep my own biases in check, I've brought along a friend.
Hey, what's up? It's Tasty! I'm TERRIBLE. Shepsky dad invited me along to be a part of this video.
Be sure to check out Tasty's channel after this, as we have a video on his channel discussing controversial Pokemon debates. But for now, let's jump straight in with a pretty divisive take. The physical special split was a bad decision. For anyone who has this opinion, I'm sorry you've never played past Gen 3, because that's the only way you could genuinely believe this. I'm not saying you have to prefer the physical special split, but to take the objective stance that it was a bad decision is a whole other thing. For those who need a refresher, prior to Gen 4, all moves were either physical or special depending on their typing. So normal moves like Swift and Hyper Voice were physical, and grass moves like Vine Whip and Leaf Blade were special. Because that totally makes sense. Why would moves like Dragon Claw or Bite be physical, or Signal Beam and Gust be special? That'd be ridiculous. While I could sit here and go through every weird example of this, that would take up way too much of your time. What are your thoughts?
The physical special split was a good decision, and it should be that way in the newer games. But it does bother me a little bit when people change the older games to have the physical special split. They weren't designed to be that way, and we've all gotten pretty used to them. It's kind of fun to go back and play the older games and be like, oh yeah, there's no physical special split. But overall, the physical special split was a good decision and deserves to be in the newer games. It fits logic and it helps Pokemon have better stab viability.
I think that last detail about stab is the biggest piece to me. Some Pokemon such as Sneasel, Kingler, and Misdreavus are examples of Mons whose stab typings worked against their stats. The physical special split gave so many Pokemon the opportunity to do better, while also creating a solid foundation for the hundreds of Pokemon to come. And while a few did lose options as a result of this change, all in all, the positives far outweigh the negatives. And like Tasty said, you can always go back and play earlier games and have that different experience. But there was no way we could keep going forward with Shadow Ball and Ancient Power being physical and Blaze Kick and Ice Punch being special. Critical hits shouldn't exist.
Okay, whoever said critical hits should not exist sounds like me when I was 10 years old trying to battle Wallace and I got crit, and then I get mad and say, why does this even exist in the game? When in reality, I just fought Drake and got a critical hit on his Salamence, and I got super stoked about it. A big part of Pokemon is randomness. I guarantee there's been many times where a critical hit is the only way that you could win a battle, and some of those times you managed to get the critical hit. How great did that make you feel? It also allows the player to need to build more strategy to work around critical hits. Critical hit boosting moves such as Focus Energy and Psycho Cut give a nice feeling of, well, this move can be good, but not always good. That's my take. Critical hits need to exist.
The Pokemon Master himself, Wolfie VGC, covered this topic a while back. He goes into a ton of depth to explain this concept, but to put it simply, critical hits bring an important factor of RNG into the game. They keep the game interesting, and they also prevent certain Pokemon like a Cosmic Power Clefable from sitting in front of you until you eventually throw your console at the wall. Are critical hits frustrating? Yeah, they can be, especially when you get one against a shiny, but getting rid of them altogether? Bad idea. Shiny Pokemon are too easy to find. Of all the topics in this video, this one is arguably the most divisive. While I found a few shinies over the years, I would in no way call myself a shiny hunter. And that said, my knee-jerk reaction to this is... Even in the newer games where it's easier to encounter Pokemon, it's not like I'm constantly running into shinies. I've had full playthroughs of modern games where I haven't come across a single one. So to say they're too easy to find feels like an exaggeration. But like I said, I'm not a shiny hunter. Maybe I'm not the right person for this topic. Tasty?
Coming from the perspective of a person who has spent many hours shiny hunting, I can promise you one thing. With Pokemon being able to be seen shiny in the overworld, it makes it so much easier to find shinies. You get a lot of encounters just by playing the game, almost as if you are just shiny hunting. Shiny hunting isn't supposed to be quick bursts of satisfaction. It's supposed to be long work that once you eventually do achieve your goal, it'll mean a lot to you. Not everyone should have a whole entire box full of shinies within 2 months of playing the game. But there are people out there who really do enjoy it and really do have the time for it. Thus, they do want to spend the long hours trying to achieve that living dex. Shinies are supposed to be special, and even if you get a shiny Oddish, which is one of the most boring and common shinies out there, it's supposed to mean a lot to you. This kind of reminds me of the whole YouTube Shorts and TikTok kind of content where everybody has such a low attention span that they can't spend over 9 hours hunting for a shiny. Which is fine, it's not for everybody, and that's why you don't need to own a ton of shinies. My conclusion is I think shinies are way too easy to find, and I feel like that they should have gone back to how they were before.
Okay, with that perspective, I can definitely understand where this idea is coming from. I do think shinies have gone from this rare occurrence that someone could brag about to being damn near expected by certain players. And at the rate you encounter Pokemon nowadays, it's definitely easier than the tedious methods required in earlier games. Truthfully, I can see both sides of this. What do you think? Are shinies too easy to find? Let me know in the comments. So our next topic was actually the title of an article from The Gamer. Pokemon gives turn-based RPGs a bad name. When I came across this article, I had a bit of a visceral reaction, especially since it started with, "I love everything about Pokemon, except playing the mainline games."
What did he say?
As I kept reading, I got the gist of what Eric Switzer was trying to say, but I still think his initial statement is way off base. Essentially, he says that Pokemon's battle system has become far too boring and simple over the years of playing ever since he was a kid, and that other turn-based RPGs have a lot more to offer the category than Pokemon does. Now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. There are a ton of amazing RPGs out there, many of which come with interesting battle mechanics that set them apart. And while he does admit to being new to the genre outside of Pokemon, I can't overlook how awful this sentence is. My first issue is with him calling the mechanics boring and simple. If you've played any game since childhood, its mechanics will be simple to you. Think about chess. Some people can literally play with their eyes closed, while others look at the board with complete confusion. To call the mechanics boring and simple just because you fully understand them is pretty subjective. Not to mention, Pokemon has had features like the Battle Frontier or World Tournament that bring much more challenge than the main story does. My bigger issue is saying it gives turn-based RPGs a bad name. If anything, Pokemon is most people's introduction to turn-based RPGs. It's the first step into the genre of incredible games, many of which you may enjoy more than Pokemon, and that's totally fine. But to sit there and say that it flat out gives them a bad name, while it brings so many people into the genre itself, is to me, ignorant. Thoughts?
I don't think Pokemon gives turn-based RPGs a bad name. I mean, when you think turn-based RPG, you are going to think Pokemon, but why is that bad? I mean, I feel like that's just referring to Pokemon being a bad game, which it's not. A lot of people enjoy Pokemon, but that is true. There are a lot of turn-based RPGs out there that I personally haven't played, but I would expect to be pretty good games. Since Pokemon is the biggest turn-based RPG, maybe it does overshadow it just a little bit. But in reality, Pokemon is very different from these other turn-based RPGs, so maybe it's just your fault for classifying Pokemon in the same category as a bunch of other games that could also be great.
I think you brought up a good point in saying that Pokemon is just different from other turn-based RPGs. But even if you do narrow in on just the battle mechanics, taking Pokemon's less complicated battle system, you know, the one that's made readily accessible for children, and saying in turn that it's the worst example in its genre, it's a pretty flimsy argument. This reminds me of another article I came across titled, "Almost a Year Later and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet Still Suck." I won't go in depth on this article, but reading through it brought me to an important realization. Pokemon fans need to relax. Many lifelong Poke fans have high expectations, and to be fair, given its caliber, you should. But at the same time, when those expectations aren't met, some of these people go ballistic. I've met people who say they won't play Scarlet and Violet until a more powerful Switch console gets released just because of the graphics. And in my opinion, if your relationship with this monster-catching franchise is that toxic where you won't play the games but still feel the need to talk about how poorly they turned out and write full articles about how much the game sucks, maybe, just maybe, you should go play something else. Pokemon, like any game, is a subjective experience, and it's great to have a community where we can share our thoughts on what we love or even don't love about this franchise. But just think real hard about some of the opinions you put out there, because sometimes it'll lead to you getting harshly judged by random dudes online. Wait, does that make us the bad guys? Huge thanks to TYKenter for joining me on this video.
Thank you for inviting me along, Shepsky Dad. I appreciate you.
Don't forget to check out our video on Tasty's channel where we go over controversial Pokemon debates. And be sure to subscribe to both of our channels for more Pokemon content. And on that note, I'll get working on the next video. So for now, as thanks for making it to the end of the video, here's a picture of my dog. Talk to y'all soon.